Birth and death bookend the passage of life through our world. Despite the fact that no one can defy this law of nature, skilled restorers can extend the lives of these precious ancient books. They use the best tools and materials. They honor tradition while seeking innovation. Behind their extraordinary skills is their passion for protecting classics, enormous dedication, and a sense of responsibility passed through generations.
它这个主纸已经就说很脆了，
这是那本那个17史那个吗？
对，那10册不是其他9册都修了吗？就剩这1册了。
A junior member of the restoration team is consulting her more experienced colleagues about a badly damaged ancient book. In such cases, young restorers often find it hard to know where to start.
反正就是没有把握的话，就哪么放一放也不要动。只要有把握，咱们就继续往下走；没把握就停止不动。
关键看这个纸还多了，强度还剩多少？
强度肯定够强，强度肯定够强。
哪怕剩10%呢，可能还就好一点。我一点没有就很难说。
Du Wei-sheng has worked at the National Library of China for 46 years. He has been involved in the restoration of the Dunhuang manuscripts, the Yongle Encyclopedia, and other top treasures in the library. He has mentored over 10 young restorers. Du has passed retirement age, but he is still hard at work, seeking to advance the techniques and materials of his craft. Over the past few years, he has been preoccupied with finding more suitable paper, a real problem facing book restoration. As China's paper-making history goes back thousands of years, the paper used in books from different dynasties varies enormously. If the right types of paper can be found, the restorers can undo much of the damage already suffered. Since its founding, the National Library of China has been able to buy high-quality ancient paper. But as time goes by, ancient paper is less used and is simply collected for its own sake. Prices for it have risen markedly, and it has become more and more difficult to find in the market. On the other hand, paper mills producing handmade papers are increasingly focusing on paper for calligraphy and painting, meaning papers of the right quality and texture for book restoration are becoming unavailable. In 2014, the National Library of China had to postpone a project to restore some precious Tang Dynasty classics because it failed to find any suitable paper. In due course, Du Wei-sheng, responsible for the project, found a handmade paper specialist, Gong Bin. Gong Bin has spent over a decade studying the ancient techniques of handmade paper production. Handmade paper can only be produced in small batches, so Gong Bin only takes customized orders. Based on the end result required, he selects the most suitable raw materials and production methods. This means that every sheet of paper the client will receive is of the highest quality. Du Wei-sheng and Gong Bin spent nearly 2 years on research before choosing mulberry-bark as their basic raw material. Then they made countless trials and careful pH tests before finally producing the optimal paper for restoring the Tang classics.
因为现在我们用的纸呢，每年用了多少？你比如我说这种，我要求非常高，是吧？但是我的用量非常低，所以一般大厂的呢，他就不愿意给你干。我估计就是能够满足我们要求的那个，在全国来讲找不出10家来，龚老师其中1家。
说我那时候刚开始要租这个地方的时候，一来这院子一看有一棵桑树，那我觉得就是这个地方了，因为它本身就有我们需要的那个材料，那我们觉得这个地方也就是属于老天安排的。
The paper making with mulberry bark originated in the Tang Dynasty. It is a paper that is delicate, soft, and strongly absorbent of water. In addition, it is not prone to fading, making it ideal for copying classics, calligraphy, or painting.
我们平常都是冬天来做， 那我们的这一次呢，就在仲夏的时候，我们来去看看这个纤维的皮子，在夏天的时候，它到底是有什么样的一种状态，和我们在说到冬天的时候做一个对比。这一道呢就是蒸这个枝子，蒸完了之后扒皮子，扒完皮子刮皮，刮完皮子再去煮。这就是我们在一个基础的这么一个前期的这几道提纯工艺的过程中的一个步骤。
The whole process to turn mulberry bark into paper consists of more than 30 steps. Such a technique originated from Sai Lun's paper-making skills, but was then slowly lost as it passed down the generations through history. Gong Bin has rediscovered this once-lost technique by studying historical materials and cultural relics.
这把人放在这儿蒸蒸啊。
Repeated beating is used to break up the mulberry fiber into pulp.
一个眼里揉不了沙子。
Soaking the fiber after pulping produces the initial form of the paper pulp.
这个夏天这个原料啊，咱们第一次来去看这实验这个，就是它还是没有这个冬天的好处理。
水的密度不一样。好一点。可以的，特别比刚才好多了。
对，因为它表面嘛好一些。
With some gentle shakes of hands, a thin layer of pulp is left on the mesh.
对，您这个可以再来一次，
还可以再来一次，
厚点也行，这不会跑，这个加的只要够，你这个随便你怎么动也都行。其实我们这好多发。
As the water evaporates, the texture of the paper appears. This might be how the very first sheet looked 1,000 years ago. It's how the beautiful and fragile plant fiber is turned into the most reliable material to record literature for posterity. The very first step in restoration is finding a correctly matching paper in terms of material, texture, and color. The passage of centuries has rendered the book's pages dark yellow, in contrast to its original milky white. That means the restorer must also find a suitable dye to make the newly made paper match the ancient pages in terms of color.
吹牛花，牵牛花啊，牵牛花呢？
弄在耳朵上吗？
弄在耳朵上干嘛？
A team from the National Library have donned thick gloves to gather chestnuts from the woods. These spiky shells are the unlikely heroes in the next step of the restoration of ancient books.
像这种植物的，它去年的和今年它颜色也会有区别。要能减个20-30斤，可能就差不多。
Tian Tingting is deputy head of the restoration team. For several years, she has been looking for the most suitable natural dyes to use in restoration work.
其实我们以前最常用的是象卵子，还有一些茶叶来进行染色做旧。但现在我在做一个植物染色研究的项目。通过那个初步研究呢，我发现板栗壳呢，它会比象卵子壳染色的颜色稳定性会更好一些。
Following Tian Tingting's initiative, the restoration team has changed from using acorns to the new dye from chestnut shells. The chestnut shell dye is both more stable and more accessible. The restoration paper is soaked in the dye and dried naturally in the air. Beyond that, adjustments must be done to match the shade of the actual book pages it will be integrated with. Sui Bin is choosing paper to use for restoration. She resorts to an unexpected tool to make sure that the color and condition of the paper match the original.
这是我们前段时间染的纸配那个汉书的，然后蒸一下，首先是给它固色，因为我们是植物染色，没有加任何的那个胶，所以它那个颜色成分不是很稳定，所以蒸一下，它这个固色效果会好。再一个就是给纸张做一个相当于湿润老化，然后让这个纸性更贴合原件吧。热气腾腾的，可惜不是馒头。就是我们蒸完的纸，可能会比蒸之前会颜色会深一点，所以我们在染纸的时候就是染的时候就让这个颜色比实际的是要浅一点，这样蒸完之后这颜色就差不多正好。
While making their innovations, these young restorers still honor some traditional practices. Despite the fact that they might seem a bit outdated, they are the unshakable norms of the craft. 5 years ago, when Sui Bin joined the restoration team, she never thought her first lesson would be in how to knead dough. Restorers must follow the same strict standards as a medical worker, meaning that all the tools must be sterilized so as not to cause any additional damage to the already fragile ancient books.
这个浆糊是修复古籍一个非常非常重要的一个工具。市场上那些有现成的那种裱画粉，然后我们不确定它那个里面的成分是不是纯净，然后不知道里面有没有什么防腐剂、添加剂什么的，我们自己做的就放心一些。网上不有卖那种解压神器，这就特别解压粘，就很 Q， 很弹，很筋道，很滑。
The paste acts as the bonding agent between the restoration paper and the damaged pages. Extracting the starch from flour and making the paste are fundamental steps. All the materials involved in the process happen to be edible. The paste, made without any chemical additives, is the best match for the old paper and could never be replaced by an industrial product. As the paste dissolves in water, the restorers can manipulate the restoration process, which not only largely keeps the original look of the books, but also leaves scope for future work. After drying, it is quite simple to keep the starch. Before they start work, restorers mix water and starch to make the paste. The ingredients and proportion of the paste and water were once a closely guarded secret. Now they serve as proof of the restorer's experience and skills. As a result of his research on handmade papermaking, Gong Bin has hosted a series of exhibitions on Han Dynasty paper over the millennia.
我们这个展览呢是叫做“载道藏真”，何以载道呢？文以载道，书以载道。那在这个空间里边呢，我们主要呈现的是王菊华先生写的这一本《中国古代造纸工程技术史》这本书。那呢，在这里边呢，它会有9个章节，然后呢，也就是我们这个9宫格来去呈现的。
These displays are the results of 8 years of hard work by Gong Bin, Du Weisheng, and Wang Juhua. They sifted through a huge amount of data, collected Ranhuang paper, the yellow paper used for calligraphy, from across the generations, sought out mulberry and golden cypress from different regions, and conducted endless tests to recreate the type of Ranhuang paper that reached its epitome in the Tang Dynasty. The paper's resilience and resistance to insects made it ideal for documents intended for long-term preservation, like official documents or religious classics. It was considered the highest quality of bast fiber papers. Through these exhibits, Gongbin demonstrates how it was refined through the ages while paying tribute to the craftsmen of the past.
一张手工纸，在那个纸上装载的是那个沉重的历史。对我来说，它唤醒了我对于这个世界的一个新的认识。所有的一切都是因那张纸，能让我去认识我的那个生命，我是因此而生的。
Besides the right materials, it's down to the long-term dedication of the restorers that such traditional techniques have survived. Time becomes visible in the restoration rooms. Skills need to be passed on to future generations so as to maintain the longevity of these precious ancient books. Li Ying joined the National Library of China 36 years ago, receiving the tools of her trade and the skills to use them from her teachers. In the old society, it was thought that if an apprentice learned all the master knew, the latter would be made redundant. This certainly does not apply in book restoration, where the veterans want to pass on their experience as fast and fully as possible to the next generation. At 55, Li Ying is due to retire this year. She will say farewell to this office, where she has more than 50 years of memories with her mother.
我母亲就是1964年学的那个5级修复班，然后一直就干到82年，后来她退休了，我就来接班了，一直到现在。你看这不是64年吗？这是第2期，第1期是63年。我觉得我跟我母亲这2代人都是在默默无人干的这一件事情。是啊，他64年开始，我是82年，我都干了36年，他是干了快30年，不到30年。这都留个纪念。
不是，那是朱老师比林老师来的早。
啊，我80年来啊，他82年来的。
你80年来，然后你81年还走了呢，你
我后来跟张
对呀
张先生上那个香港路学去了。
我来的时候你不在，你学习去了。
那时候那个因为馆里没地儿，这是我师傅张世达。
After the foundation of the People's Republic of China, Zheng Shida was among the first batch of experts to begin restoring ancient books. In 1956, Zheng joined the Beijing Library, which was later to become the National Library of China. Besides his own work, he was also responsible for tutoring the younger generation of restorers. Today, many of them are the experts in their field.
我跟张世达先生学，就是前1年多是在北京学的，后一半程呢是在南昌学的，等于这是在张先生他那个住家的他住在那个南昌一中那校园里照的，当时其实就是要走了，跟张先生合的影。
这会儿还不堵，原来这段可堵了，原来都不敢走这新街口这儿。我这好多年都没来这边了。
Li Ying worked here in the old building of the National Library on Wenjin Street for over 10 years.
这个我当年来的时候，这2边都是那个很茂密的那种松柏。这是那个主楼，就是我们叫1号楼，原来叫图书馆的主楼。
Today, number 1 building houses the Library of Ancient Books, home to precious classics.
原来我们就是在这块儿一片平房，现在改成文经书院了。
Li Ying is binding a recently restored volume. This is the final step of restoration work and the final step of her 36-year career.
之后3本书。 慢慢成真。行吧。这么多年，结束了。
On public holidays, the buildings of the National Library are quite lively spaces, as enthusiasts come to attend various special interest courses. Tian Ting Ting is teaching the restoration class this year. Despite wildly differing backgrounds and experience, the students are united by their common interest.
今天计划因为上一周刚好是修了书页，待会儿我让大家看一下，就是说修完以后，压平了，然后进行一些裁剪。大概到10点的时候呢，我给大家讲讲那个修复用纸。
Only by giving people wider knowledge about the restoration of ancient books can the ancient skills develop healthily.
那你可能就降过多的地方，它有可能就粘上了，但是有些可能就粘不上。
没粘上。因为我退休了，觉得有时间干以前想干又没有时间干的事儿了，所以那个国图一出了这个培训班以后，我就过来了。
我从事历史研究工作，就是主要是做明清徽州器乐文书这方面，然后平时接触的这些器乐文书比较多。然后现在民间文书呢，保存条件不是太好，所以我就想学习一下，为自己将来的研究做一些基础工作吧，算是。我觉得你画的比理科的好。
这是脱的绢，我刚才以为是纸
不是纸因为纸在缝隙的地方它容易就磨损，一般像这些地方都是用织品去做的。
It may be a long road for these students to become real restorers, but Tian Ting Ting spares nothing in sharing all her knowledge and skills, just as her master did once for her. On the last day before her retirement, Li Ying gives Tian Ting Ting a final briefing. It is the handing on of a mission of near sacred importance in the lifeblood of China's culture. The art of restoring ancient books is passed from one generation to another in a story that has no end.